We take you overseas next. Some new video showing the next step in the growing battle between Israel and Hamas. Israel's military says it shot down an unmanned drone from Gaza, possibly one that looks like this one, traveling along its southern coast. It's the first time Israel says it's encountered such technology since the battle with militants in the Gaza Strip began last week. Big questions, of course, about where the militants are getting that technology. No signs of ceasefire between the two sides, though. We want to talk about this with Jonathan Schanzer. He's a vice president of research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And Jonathan, we heard from the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking on Fox News Sunday, saying really Americans don't understand what this is like to have rockets pouring into your country over the majority of your population. You're an American who actually knows what that's like because you were just there in Israel. Just tell us a little bit about your experience.
Sure, Jenna. I mean, I should just note that I lived in Israel when the second Intifada broke out. That's when I was getting my master's degree, and that was, of course, when the threat of Hamas suicide bombings were getting Israelis running for cover. People were afraid to go out shopping. They were afraid to go out to malls. Now we've got a different kind of tactic where rockets are being fired blindly out of the Gaza Strip into Israeli population centers, and you have basically 15 or 20 seconds to get to a shelter. I had two experiences like that, once in Jerusalem where I had to quickly get off of a rooftop deck where I was having dinner. The following day I had to go into a shelter at the airport because rockets were firing in. This is the way a lot of Israelis are living right now, and of course this is a climate of fear. There
are growing calls for restraint on the behalf of the international community for Israel to show restraint from firing back into Gaza. You don't hear those same calls necessarily for the folks in Gaza terrorists firing into Israel. Talk us through that double standard. Why does it exist?
Well, look, I mean, the bottom line is that there has not been a death yet on the Israeli side as a result of the rocket fire coming out of the Gaza Strip. But that doesn't tell the whole story. The reason why there has not been a death is because there is a system that has been developed by the Israelis with assistance here from the United States, a significant amount of funding. That system is called Iron Dome, and it literally shoots down these rockets with anti-rocket artillery. This has saved countless Israeli lives. But the intent by Hamas and some of these other groups is absolutely there to inflict as much damage as humanly possible. So the Israelis have an edge thanks to U.S. assistance and their technology, their ingenuity. But certainly that's not told right now as the story unfolds.
And a big question as well, Jonathan, is there a way to overwhelm the Iron Dome?
There has been. I think we've seen a couple of examples where Hamas has fired 5 or 6 or 7 rockets, and it's been, I think, perhaps a little bit more difficult for the Israelis to tackle all of them. The system, though, is very complex, and they're able very quickly to determine whether those rockets are destined for areas that are perhaps empty or where there are not civilians there, and so they choose not to shoot them down, focusing on the ones that appear to be headed towards civilian populations.
And as you point out, if the technology wasn't there, this would be a very different conflict because we would see deaths obviously on both sides. Where do you think this goes from here? What are you going to be watching to see if this gets bigger than it already is?
Well, so far we've seen the United States offer to broker this. That has really fallen on deaf ears over there in the Middle East. We've heard talks of perhaps the Egyptians brokering a ceasefire, but the Egyptians and Hamas don't get along terribly well right now. What's interesting is that we're hearing calls for Turkey or Qatar to broker a ceasefire. This is very ironic because both of these countries are sponsors of Hamas, and so I don't see how they would be able to do this with any credibility. And so it's quite possible that this thing drags on for another couple of days or perhaps even longer.
If that's the case, what's the appropriate role for the United States in this?
Look, the United States should be trying to get both sides to back down. We need to keep those channels open with both sides. But I also think that we need to understand that the Israelis do have a right to continue to defend themselves. You don't want to see these long-range rockets going into Israeli territory, and there will be a limit to how many of these rockets they can shoot down. And so I think there needs to be an understanding of the defense needs of the Israelis, and I think the United States has basically accepted that for now.
All right, we'll see where it goes from here. Jonathan, great to see you as always. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.